The first mainframe that we worked on that was powering Tata Motors' entire payroll is less powerful than my iPhone today.
You made this transition from program management into engineering and data engineering.
Looking back at that decision, it made me a completely different person.
What inspired you to make that transition? Sometimes people get stuck into I've invested so much in this technology. And I find the same with career.
If you are defensive about, you are missing out on a huge opportunity.
Prasad Bhandarkar is the Vice President of Reality Labs AR/VR Engineering. He has been leading 300 plus team across 6 locations. He has also been the Director of Digital Commerce at Adobe.
You may not always have all the information. How do you navigate decision making?
I actually signed up for it. Allows you to spot body language. It allows you to ask questions. That's my personal experience in this.
Hello, welcome to the Priyanka Shinde Podcast, where we dive into the art and science of strategy, execution, and leadership. I'm your host, Priyanka Shinde, author of The Art of Strategic Execution and a consultant for tech leaders. In this podcast, I bring you candid conversations with top executives, startup founders, and industry experts who are driving innovation, delivering results, and staying ahead in today's competitive landscape. We will break down what it takes to tap into founder mode and turn vision into action. If you are serious about elevating your leadership and execution skills, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube. It helps the podcast and ensures you never miss an episode. Hi everyone, welcome to the Priyanka Shinde Podcast. Today's guest is Prasad Bhandarkar. He's a Vice President of Data Engineering at Meta, where he leads the analytics and machine learning across the metaverse, augmented and virtual reality teams, driving technology, insights, and growth at scale. With over 3 decades of experience, Prasad is a seasoned analytics leader known for applying AI and data-driven solutions to complex business problems. He's passionate about setting bold visions, executing with intellectual curiosity, and developing high-performing teams. Beyond tech, Prasad is also a classically trained musician. He began learning Hindustani music at the age of 8 and has studied under the legendary Padma Vibhushan Pandit Hari Prasad Chaurasia. He performs regularly on flute, both in solo classical concerts and as an accompanist in light music concerts. Prasad is also a certified executive coach, helping engineers, product leaders, and data professionals unlock their potential. Welcome to the show, Prasad. Very excited to have you.
Thanks, Priyanka. I'm so glad I'm here. Thanks for that flattering introduction. It was kind of nice to hear my professional introduction and music introduction intermingled together. That hasn't happened before. Glad to be here. Before we start the conversation, I just wanted to call out that I'm here in my personal capacity, and we are not going to talk about my work at Meta in any great detail. So I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited for our conversation. I've heard a lot about you from, close friends and family that know you. And I've heard a lot about your leadership as well. And so, there are some of those things that I want to talk to you about. And so we have so much to talk about besides, where you work at. You have had a remarkable career arc. Can you walk us through some of your defining moments?
Oh wow! Looking back, I would say there were quite a few, and I'll walk you through those. But there are also a few lessons that I learned that maybe I could teach myself 30 years ago. It would have been much more useful. But my move into technology was a little bit accidental. My first job was at Tata Motors out of engineering in Pune. And when I was interviewing with them, they said that, wow, you have good aptitude for math and so on, which I'm sure all engineers have. But then they had this completely new stream for basically transforming their old COBOL mainframe based systems into Unix, C, and Oracle. So they said, why don't you kind of take the aptitude test for computing? And I had taken some courses in on computing in my engineering college, a few programming languages like C and operating system Unix and so on. So I said, you know what, let me try this out. And it was not like a very conscious decision, but boy, looking back at that, if that hadn't happened, God knows where my career direction would be. The second one was like 2 years into that job, I was loving it so much. Imagine like in the hot climate of India, you get to sit in air conditioned rooms and just like work on the hottest things at that time. I told my parents that I'm done with my education and so on. But to my mother's credit, she pestered me to write MBA entrance exams for IIMs in India. And as it turned out, like my IIM Lucknow admission and a visa to come to US through Tata Motors almost came simultaneously. And at that time, going from Pune to Lucknow was 18 hours by train, and probably coming to US is 18 hours by flight. So in spite of my conviction of like staying in computing, I did decide to do my MBA and went to IIM Lucknow. And looking back at that decision was also very pivotal. It made me a completely different person. I stayed with technology after I did my MBA, which was also another non-conventional things to do at that time, because like the general rat race used to be in the direction of marketing and finance. Those jobs used to pay great, and people generally did not have an idea on what information technology major might be. But I did that. I did my second major in finance, and that second major helped tremendously with personal finance and that sort of stuff. I stayed with the other. The point came in was when I was in US a few years later. That by that time my major competency was in SAP, and moving from SAP production planning, MRP, those kind of exciting things into what I thought was its next evolution, which is constraint based planning. And I won't go into get into the details of that, but jumping to that technology at the top of the my game on SAP, when like SAP consulting rates were like astronomical and so on, that was another key decision that I made. Fast forward, I can like talk later about like getting out of program management. That was a key decision, and getting out of Adobe at the time when I thought like my work there was done, and the circumstances were such that I thought I should get out of there and explore other things. That was a key decision, so much so that like actually people had my friends had come home to convince me not to do that without having another job in hand. But I really needed a break at that point, so that was a key decision. So some of the lessons that I've learned out of these decisions. In fact, another key decision is after joining Meta, like I was first for 2.5 years, I was in Facebook, the Blue app, and I wanted to do something radically different. And Reality Labs was a much smaller setup. My team size would have probably halved, or like actually gone to one fourth compared to the other opportunities that I had. But making the bet on Reality Labs, because I had a lot of interest on where things were going, was timely and another pivotal moment. And last 5 years have been really great. So my lessons learned out of that were, number one, I have always prioritized learning over anything else. My firm belief is if you prioritize learning, then money and other things will follow. If you chase money, you'll get neither. So that's one definite lesson. The other lesson learned was like often inaction is feels safe, doing nothing and just continuing in your current job, but often that presents actually the higher risk in long term than taking action and making some hard calls. When you make those hard calls, listen to your inner voice, listen to your heart, and just make those calls. Otherwise, like you kind of stay in the rut, and I've done that mistake as well. And then the third lesson learned, in especially if you are in tech, when to make the transition to the technologies go in waves, and typically you are in the previous wave at the top of your game, you're doing very well, you're getting paid well for doing well, but that technology might saturate and plateau or even decline, and therefore making the call at the right time to just give up on all that and get jump into the next new stuff, even though it feels very uncomfortable at that time. I think that is another lesson that I have learned, and it's an important lesson for people in tech.
Wow, that's so great. And this is so different from most of the time when I start talking to folks. We start about career, and like a lot of the lessons come towards the end of the episode. And this is, we are just kicking off with amazing lessons. So thank you so much for that. And I think each of the points you mentioned is so valuable because a lot of times you're talking about making, sometimes a theme that I notice is like you have to sometimes make unconventional choices. Some things that sometimes people would, like you said, try to convince you against doing. But sometimes you have to follow your instinct and your gut and believe in like what you truly think aligns with maybe your strengths, things that you might want to do. And those can still be the right things and take you, you will make something out of it because those were the things that you chose to do. And I really like that you're talking about like either choosing the MBA over coming to the US, or choosing to do something focused on tech within your MBA, even if you chose finance as your second major. Otherwise, most people would do finance or marketing. And I have an MBA too, and I did similar. I did product innovation and not marketing or finance in MBA either, similar to what you're saying. And then same thing with the team size getting half, or even I wanted to actually ask you about program management, because you may or may not know, but I also have a program management background. For many years, I'd been in the technical program management space. And so even today, a lot of people come to me and I get this question a lot, which is, what does my career look like in technical program management? That's a very constant question. And especially a lot of changes have happened over the past many years. And I obviously tell them like, don't look at that as like one way of thinking about your career. And especially today, you made this transition from program management into engineering and data engineering many years ago. So I would love to for you to share a little bit more about how you made that transition and what inspired you to make that transition.
Cool. So first of all, like I did not start as program manager, right? As I said, in Tata Motors, my job was very technical and stayed technical for next, I think, at least a decade. Move to program management was more of a, shall we say, I was not following my own lessons. Partly driven by circumstances of the time, my green card was underway and so on. So there was limits to what I could do in terms of career change, but partly inertia and not changing anything, or like not thinking deeply about what I really passionately feel about, and therefore let the sort of career drift into program management. That happened when I was at Intel, and like my first job in Adobe was in program management. And just to be clear, I mean, I have nothing against program management. I actually did my certification in PMP and all that stuff. So like I used to manage very massive projects at Adobe. Like one of them was like 125, 130 people transformative project. But as they say that you should put yourself in the center of the three overlapping circles, right? What you are good at, what you're passionate about, and what pays well. And I think with program management, I was good at that, but I was definitely not passionate about it. And this is again personal. I know so many people in my personal life who are so much better organized than I am. Starting with my wife to begin with, right? But that's not who I was. So that internal dissonance kept on presenting itself. The external dissonance also eventually started presenting because, like, I think the recognition that I was getting at that time, in spite of managing complex programs and so on, wasn't as much as I would have expected. And I was frustrated about that. I was venting about that to a friend on how they don't recognize execution and how it is important. And I remember he giving me a cold stare and saying, "Hey, Prasad, let me tell you some fun thing. People pay basically for thought leadership, and the world doesn't pay as much for just execution, right? So where is your thought leadership?" And that statement was almost like I could have rationalized that because program management also has a lot of thought leadership to land programs on the on the right time, under budget, and so on. But that statement was like somebody throwing a glass of cold water on my face. And I made the choice at that time. I went and told my manager at that time that this is the last program that I'm managing. It was still 6 months away from its fruition. He was a little bit shocked, but to his credit, and I consider him a friend now, I still meet him. He allowed me to do that. And I got into a role at the end of that that basically had no execution component and only thought leadership component. My thinking was, my brand at that time in Adobe was, oh, this guy manages big programs, probably not a lot of thought leadership, but execution is wonderful. So I said, you know what, let me just transform that. And I as part of that role, I got myself into one of the pricing strategy program that VP of FENA at that time was running. And we found so many things that were broken about Adobe's pricing at that time. And that got visibility all the way to the CEO and CEO staff level. And that eventually changed my internal brand in Adobe completely. And so, subsequent to that, when Adobe started moving into cloud subscriptions business, the need for analytics sort of came up. And I had this background, but within Adobe, that was a very well kept secret. So I just decided to sign up for that. And then, like, I remember telling my eventually boss at that time, the VP of the group, that I want to do that because that I can execute, I have a thought leadership. If I do both in that, then that's what takes people to director. And I still remember when I told her that, her body language, like it was a conversation in one of the Fridays in Adobe San Francisco office. And you could see that little bit of a cringe, right? Like, what does this guy think? And, what of himself. But believe it or not, like literally 3 years or less from that point, she was the one who promoted me to director. And my point there is, like, being mindful about, like, who you are, what drives you, what you're passionate about, what your strengths are, very well aware of what weaknesses are. And of course, taking that feedback that my friend gave, not defensively, but like something to think deeply about, really helped me in that case in navigating my career back to area where, back to the three center of those three concentric circles that I mentioned.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think it's so important. You kind of took what somebody had shared with you and really kind of looked deeply and said, how do I take this information and do something about it? Because I also find sometime, and it goes back to the point you were making about transitions in tech, right? Like sometimes you say tech is changing so fast, but you kind of sometimes people get stuck into like, oh, I've invested so much in this technology. Why should I give this up? Why should I shift and transition and move over to something else? And I find the same with career. Like if somebody has invested, say, be in becoming a program management. I mean, like you said, you did certifications, you gave a PMP and everything. For many people, that could be it. Like, I've invested so much. Why should I change and move into something else? I don't even know what this strategy or thought leadership might become. And so, what advice would you offer someone who is maybe in that position that you were in, venting or thinking about what do I do now? I don't know what to do.
I think it's very simple. So first of all, when people come and tell you that you are not on the right path, or like your thinking is needs to be fundamentally different, if you are defensive about hearing that out, you are missing out on a huge opportunity. Because first of all, not a lot of people will come and tell you that. The world is full of people who will tell you what you want to hear, especially when they know that this is radically different and I might get a backlash, right? And like if people like are not open to feedback and like have tendency to create that backlash, they don't get feedback, and therefore they miss out on some of these signals. Believe it or not, when I got promoted to VP in Meta, one of the things that I did was talk to the guy who actually told me that back in the days. This was like almost a decade and a half ago, and I'm sure he had forgotten about that conversation completely. But that conversation was transformative for me and my mindset change. So when people give you feedback, listen to it very carefully. Even if you disagree with that in the moment, process it. You may eventually disagree with that for the right reasons, and at that time, it's okay to discard that because ultimately it's your life. But like, discard feedback thoughtfully, or like process it thoughtfully before discarding. That's my personal experience in this.
Well, that's very well said, and I will talk a little bit more about feedback because you have been leading teams and organizations. You have scaled teams from dozens to hundreds, and leadership is very complicated. You have firsthand experience with this. What, according to you, is one leadership skill that doesn't scale easily?
That's a great question, and I think my experience is leadership. First of all, leadership growth is almost like immunization. Like I've written about this a little bit. It must be on LinkedIn somewhere. Mistakes I have made as first line manager, and mistakes I have made as manager of managers, and I can tell you mistakes I have made as director and VP or whatever that is. But the first mistake people typically make, and I certainly did, was typically ICs who are high performing invited to become managers. And when you are IC, you have complete control on your success, or mostly complete control on your success. You work hard, you are technically smart, and like that gives you recognition. When you become manager, your team is what makes you successful. And initially, I made a mistake of actually trying to do the job for the entire team, three, four people team that I had. And I generally used to be frustrated that they're not doing X and Y and Z and whatever. Therefore, let me just make it. And a couple of months down the line, I had one on one with my manager at the time. And I was like venting about the team and this and that. And again, like another good advice that still stayed with me at this time, probably 21 years later, is he said that, like, how are you feeling? He said, I told him I'm feeling exhausted and tired and whatever. Said, you know why you're feeling that way? Because you're like basically pulling together whole team's work yourself. And that's not the job description. The job description is like, how are you going to grow those people into their full potential and therefore maximize team's performance, right? And one of the great advice that I got from him was, especially as you become manager of managers and like start managing much bigger teams, your job is to basically maximize the probability of success of that team, knowing fully well that that probability will never reach 100%. And depending on the nature of the team that you might have inherited, the team where you actually made mistakes, or sometimes the team where the people you trusted to make the right decisions made their mistakes, right? Those kind of factors drive the team's performance below the 100%. It's never going to be 100%. The question is, what are you doing? What few things, actions that you are taking at any given point in time to take the team's performance to the next level? And I think that was a great advice that I got. And to coming back to your question, the leadership skill that doesn't scale easily it's that growth that one has to go through at every stage, as a first line manager, as manager of managers, as like a director of a sizable team, and so on and so forth. Like how do you make peace with that fact, which is like how are you maximizing the performance of your team while making a peace with the fact that it's not going to be 100% all the time. And then you will actually develop a lot of empathy, compassion for people in your team, and a little bit of forgiveness for mistakes that anyone makes, and coach them, spend time on coaching, and put them to the optimal level.
There is, you talk about, like, often going from IC to manager, you think about control as the first thing that is the first lesson you learn,
Exactly.
because that's the biggest difference when you go from being an IC to a manager. And you have also seen these things going from manager to managers of managers, and then to a director and a VP. So what has been surprising to those next step ups that you have had, stepping into say executive role, getting into director and then VP, like what changes there, or what has been surprising at that level, when now you're not managing ICs anymore, you're managing very senior people, very senior leaders in their own right, who can really operate independently, and now you have like such a bigger organization than before.
Yeah, I think the surprises that you get, especially at the stage that I am in my career, are number one, upside surprises, right? The kind of problems that the teams are and can solve. Like, I can probably go on another occasion about like the pushing the boundaries with AI, and that my team has been working on various problems, and it is absolutely fascinating to see how quickly they learn that, and come up with ideas to do that. In some ways, that they are way smarter than I am, right? On the other hand, the same people who I think are so brilliant, I see they occasionally make mistakes that make me wonder how the heck did he or she make that mistake? Like, they're so brilliant. And it almost reminds me of when I started teaching my son how to drive, right? And he's a very careful driver, and he would drive probably 99% of the time really well. And then suddenly he would make mistakes. What the heck just happened? Like, and it will shake me up. Right. I think those kind of surprises you start getting occasionally, and those surprises, and then like I occasionally, when I get the surprise after the initial shock, I also smile that okay, I myself must have made those kind of mistakes at some point, must have learned, must have been coached by my manager, and therefore I am who I am, and I can now spot those mistakes, and they are still learning. So that's I think. An interesting experience going through this process.
Yeah, that's really is like you're looking at it from a different angle now
In some
than when
ways,
you're
it gives me a comfort that, like, in spite of having so many smart people who are exponentially smarter than I am, I still have a role. There's a role to play here.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I mean, there's always this question, like, as leaders, what is it that leaders are doing? And there is so much to do. And at an executive level, there's a lot of purview you have, and there's so much context that you need. How do you build that context, and how do you maintain that context?
I think that's another great question. I think that context, I mean, I'm blessed to be at Meta, and the internal culture is actually very sharing. Actually, we have our internal tools where that context is broadly shared. There are frequent employee meetings, not just like company wide, but also at every level. So you get a lot of context, even if you are a junior most IC, you will get much broader context than most other companies that have, in fact, all other companies that I've worked for. The advantage that opens up is that since you have that broader context, even as a like university hire junior IC, have ability to connect the dots and make that big impact that like if it was just a top-down context sharing, you would not get. So I guess maybe this is a non-scalable answer or non-replicable, but I wish every company was that way, because if you share more context, that there's a more of that amplification effect or multiplier effect. There's a book on this, right?
Mhm.
And then like more
Yeah.
people can solve bigger problems, and it lifts the whole place up.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
conversely, like I, in my role also, I'm responsible for providing that context. So like writing internal posts or like team meetings and so on. Like it has to be a very thoughtful communication exercise.
Yeah, we talk about like context, and then there is a lot of information also. Like, so sometimes, depending on what conversation is going on, and without getting into any specifics, like there are so many decisions that any leader has to make. You may not always have all the information. So you might have some context, but you may not always have all the information about something. How do you navigate decision making when you don't have all the information?
But you never have all the information in any context. Like even if like I can go back to some of the examples that I gave, right? Like going to IIM Lucknow versus just picking up a random example versus coming
Yeah.
to US. Did I have all the context about what an MBA education can do to a person? No. Did I have all the context on what it would have meant coming to US in early 90s when like the internet boom was taking off? Certainly not. But then you make decisions based on the subset of context that you have, but you also make the decision based on the value system that you follow. And I think generally you land in a good place, but like there's never a way to know. Like who knows? Like if I'd come in early 90s and made some right investments, maybe I would have wrote that internet boom and would have been somebody. But like that's not the path that I chose. And by the way, to make the right decisions then on financial investment, I did not have tools either. So maybe that outcome may not have happened. So like life is full of these forks and chances and like decision making based on imperfect information, and you just have to apply your whatever you have information have your in your front, make the decision based on your value system and not look back as to what if.
I think that's very. I mean, without even thinking about being at an executive level or being in a leadership role, I think giving the example of the MBA thing that you shared is like decisions are there at every.
Correct. And just like I said earlier, like sometimes that there's a cost to not making a decision. In fact, often there is a big cost to not making a decision that you don't perceive. People always forget that because the inertia gives false sense of comfort. And that is
Yeah.
true with career decisions, but that's true with any decision, whether personal life decisions or like work related decisions or like professional decisions you make at work.
I think there's sometimes I hear a lot about like either there is a analysis paralysis going on. So people are trying to like get a lot of information, and then there's either too much information that they're trying to parse, or they're just afraid that there is not enough information. So they just get stuck into not making a decision, like you're saying, like
I have seen,
inaction.
since I'm in analytics, I can tell you like team culture A and team culture B, or company culture A and company culture B, like without getting into a lot of specifics. In one situation, actually, I should say team culture because it's not like across the board, but like in one situation, if anything is imperfect with data, those executives created a lot of noise pressure, and we used to have a situation where if anything is broken, like everyone drops their work they're doing and just focuses on micromanaging whatever the data pipelines and so on. And compared to that, I, especially after coming to Meta, like I realize how much peace there is in terms of like making decision based on incomplete or imperfect data, because like a lot of times the what you need for your decision making is only directional data rather than like pinpoint accurate data. And then with reflection, a lot of times people make issue out of getting pinpoint accurate data because they're not comfortable making decision in first place, no matter what. It has nothing to do with data. right? So I think getting comfortable to make decisions based on directional, imperfect data is part of the job, whether it's like at work or like personal decisions.
This is great. I love it. Coming from a person in data and analytics, I think like you don't necessarily need all the data. You just need like directional data is probably good enough. And I think it's your comfort with being able to make decisions. I think that's more important than data probably.
Yep.
Um, yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to touch back on something that you had mentioned earlier about feedback and about, not all the people are there to give you real feedback. And this happens more and more as you sort of go up the chain, or so to say, or up in leadership levels, and you always hear this term like that. It's lonely at the top.
Mhm.
So, have you ever felt that loneliness at the top? And if so, how do you build that support and resilience in those moments?
I think first of all, giving and receiving feedback is not as hard as most people think it is. What is hard is most people are defensive about it, and that makes it harder. But like if you have the right circumstances, getting and receiving feedback is a very natural thing. And I think I'll just call out one caveat in your question, lonely at the top. I'll give you an example. Even when I was in the process of making that journey into out of program management into something else at Adobe, right? At that time, I had hired an executive coach at my own time, and I wasn't particularly rich at that time to spend, I think, $5,000 or something out of my own pocket was material amount of my post-tax annual income. And I saw the power of feedback and questioning and so on, and what it can bring. Because this gentleman who was my executive coach at that time, former PwC partner, and sort of doing this as a retirement gig probably, but he started, I gave him some charter like, hey, I want to think about product management or something, right? To his credit, he did not take at the face value. He started probing me on multiple directions. So one of the things that he probed me was like, why do you want to be in Bay Area? Like if you go to Sacramento or like even other areas, like your cost footprint simply drops, and that gives you a lot more flexibility. So we went through that mental journey, and I found myself, I had very strong reasons to be in Bay Area, like least of which are like social reasons. I was actively performing music and so on and so forth. So, but the good thing is that we talked through that very rationally, as opposed to, hey, this is not my why I hired you. Let's talk about something else. The next thing he did was like, if you want to do something different from program management, let's say product strategy or something like that, why don't you like think of you yourself as a brand and your music as the product? And at that time my YouTube channel already had like a good number of viewers and so on. It was early days for YouTube, and so people were watching my videos and whatnot. But just walking through that conversation, and again, obviously I did not take that path, but getting to a clarifying position where why I'm not taking that path, and I am actually at peace with that, right? That was a very, very good thing. I think what worked in that process is that if I were to keep his charter too narrow and say just focus on these few things, and like, I don't think the kind of mental clarity I got on many of these other issues I would have got. So, like coming back to your main question, though, like the main thing in feedback is the relationship, right? And the relationship, like if you create the environment of, if you're a receiver of feedback, right? If you create environment of comfort and gratitude for receiving feedback, then people giving you feedback will open up much more, as opposed to being worried about their own relationship with you and therefore not telling you things that you need to hear. Now, In professional context, some companies do this very well. In Meta, there's a big feedback culture, a big part of Meta's own culture. But focusing on those relationships first and like creating the zone of comfort, especially with trusted people, that is extremely important. It does get like lonely at the top sometimes because organizational hierarchy brings you a lot of perceived power, whether you wield it or not. And that can create a culture of psychophancy. People will tell you whatever you want, they think you want to hear, and so on. So, how do you not create that culture? And also, how do you bring your ecosystem of mentors, whether it's your peers or like some neutral folks in your organization who are not directly involved in your work, or like people outside your company. That is an extremely important thing to do. And I have been blessed with a few, so that has been very useful.
Yeah, you're right. I think there is so much about the culture that you can create around feedback. And there is a lot you can do on your own in terms of how you look at feedback, how you receive it, and how you give it. And there is only so much you can do in terms of how another person reacts to the feedback.
Right.
And definitely, I mean, having been at Meta and having been part of that culture, I think Meta does it really well. I can definitely like say that as well, and I totally agree with you. And I've seen it outside not being done, and I'm sure as somebody who also coaches other folks, and I too as a coach, like I hear a lot of time from people that the culture of feedback isn't as prevalent in other places as we hope it would be. And so I'm sure like you have these conversations with a lot of, other people, either it's coaches or even friends and family, right? Around feedback or around psychological safety, really. And even as you think about your teams, psychological safety becomes so important. And so how do you create that? How do you like what does it really look like inside a high performing team? If other leaders had to think about that and think about how to incorporate that in their own teams, what
I
should
think
they be doing?
again the first principle in that is like relationships first, feedback next, right? Because without that, the zone of comfort, that feedback is not going to go anywhere. So you might as well not waste your time. But like once that is established, like I'll give you an example. Like there's somebody that I had to tell that you need to improve your executive presence. Right now, I've got that feedback as well at some point in time in my career and so on, and that's a very abstract feedback, right? So I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to tell this person that they need to improve their executive presence. What does that even mean to them, right? So I actually took some extra steps to actually ask that question to AI chatbot, and the answer came amazingly detailed in terms of like what specific actions that they can take. What first of all, what the executive presence means, what action they can take, and in what sequence they can go about taking those actions. That had like tangible specific actions like hey, you need to kind of take 5 minutes of preparation or 10 minutes of preparation for your key meetings, read the pre-reads, and like have a well informed point of view on what you're going to bring up in those meetings as part of the reactions. Now some of that stuff over a period of time becomes second nature, but some of that stuff has to be practiced like any other skill. And giving that sort of tangible feedback, I'm sure was appreciated by making that extra effort in that. The second part in this is I'm a huge believer in executive coaching, as you can imagine, because after that coaching experience that I described, I actually signed up for executive coaching 10-day intensive at UC Berkeley and became executive coach myself. Not so much to actually become a coach practitioner, or maybe I'll become at some point in time eventually. But like I thought executive coaching taught me skills that can actually help me with my day job, whether it was at Adobe or here in Meta, because It allows you to spot body language. It allows you to ask questions in a way that are open-ended, probing, and yet non-judgmental, right? It allows you to maintain little bit of emotional disconnect versus like going all in to preach to somebody on how they should approach their problems, because everyone is different. So lots of interesting skills learned in a very interesting way, and that has been of tremendous help to me. As a result, by the way, like even if I'm not coaching somebody, I often use executive coaches for my team, and actually I've used for myself as well various points even after that first experience.
I mean, I think that's so great. I think one, just having those coaching skills, irrespective of if you like professionally are a coach or not, so important as a leader, because it just gives you a whole different set of tools. And there is this whole I think manager behavior, I think there's like be more coach like or something like that, which is, it just helps you, especially as a senior leader, when you're also, you have many other senior leaders on your team. Your conversations are not necessarily about like day-to-day things. Your conversations are very different, almost where you are really probing, or you're kind of trying to brainstorm. And so having those like conversations, like you said, observing at a deeper level can really help. And those coaching skills are really great. And I think it's great that you're providing those like executive coaching for your team as well, because like you saw the benefits. I think an executive coach is so much like in your corner. They're like helping you think outside the box a lot of times, or like really challenge yourself sometimes. And I really kind of, I think I really wanted to also go in further on, like as you are also working and you're developing you work with a lot of senior leaders, you're helping them develop. When you are looking to hire senior leaders, or say promote someone internally to become an executive, to become a director, what is it that you look for beyond their resume or the results that they have produced?
I think one of the things that is extremely important to me, and this I've learned the hard way, is like I try to get a sense of their motivation and value system. Like over the years, especially when, for example, my team was like fast growing in Meta, right? On the way, you see people looking at, oh wow, these people are growing, and like let me join them because like I'll be able to manage a large team and that sort of thing. And those kind of motivation signals I tend to really detest. Like what I like is, problem focused people who are motivated by the products that we are building or the impact that they are creating, and not so much by the size of their organization or size of their cost center and any of those other very detrimental values. Because like if you bring in these kind of people, it destroys your team. So that is actually, I've actively abandoned people who are like that. The other thing that I look for is how much of they are team player and how much of they are like individual brilliant. And that no matter how brilliant people are individually, I generally bias towards getting team player, because like my job is to optimize the performance of the team. And if getting a one, and I've actually observed this in one particular team situation, that this particular person used to present a very professional view on the team and so on. And therefore I obviously always used to go and like and to talk to this person. And some situation caused this person to move out of the team, and I saw the positive impact that it created on the rest of the team. It was a relief for them. And like I noted that I'm not ever going to make that mistake again. No individual brilliant people who sort of try to hog for a limelight.
That is so true. And some of these things you have to really, I think, assess closely. And I think this is where, again, going back to the coaching skills and the observation can really continue to help. And yeah, this is not something you can like look for in a resume. That being said, is there like a underrated leadership skill that something that, few people prioritize, but all successful leaders always master?
I don't know whether even all successful people master. I can say think of so many examples of our industry leaders where obviously they haven't mastered that, but I think as I mentioned earlier, like as you grow in the organization hierarchy, there's always a chance of you not getting any contrarian or critical opinions around you, and just like get yes men or yes women around you, and making sure that you are not getting sucked into echo chamber and having processes to or like having team structure to have, as well as the comfort level for people to tell you what might be going wrong with the team or what you're doing wrong and that sort. I think I put a lot of premium on that, try to do that consciously. I don't know how successful I've been, but like nonetheless, that's one place where I've seen like a lot of people trip.
It can be hard, right, to sort of distinguish if is this really, are they really saying it for just the sake of saying it, or
Yeah, but I mean, you can make out sometimes. Like if you are consciously looking for those kind of signals, you can make out like who's giving you information that you want to hear versus you need to hear.
and I'm sure with experience and the more
With
you kind of
experience
like.
as well as with mistakes on the way, you learn
Learn.
that sometimes the hard way. But yes.
Right. Well, I want to switch gears a little bit from people. I want to talk about technology. You are at the intersection of three very exciting technologies: AI, AR, VR, and data. What excites you the most?
They're all related, aren't they? Like data is like basically lifeblood or like oxygen for AI, and a lot of AR VR experiences are also super powered by AI. So they're sort of related. So I wouldn't necessarily say there are three different things in my world. They are sort of convergent to one package. In fact, we are increasingly living in a era where data, AI, and AI plus. So, for example, robotics, or like I'm sure some of the listeners are driving Teslas or like self-driving cars and so on, like or have even Roomba at their home for vacuuming and so on. So AI plus robotics is another big place, or AI plus genomics for like cancer cure and those kind. So that's the era that we are living in. I think so. Like I wouldn't necessarily answer your question as like those are the three things. Now, personally, what excites me about them is getting my hands dirty on the technology in general, whether it's new devices or new software tech and that sort. That's what drove me to technology in first place, and especially being here in Silicon Valley in the middle of things most of the time. That is the exciting world of it. I'll give you an example. Before LLMs became a thing, in fact, like my first exposure to AI was actually in my business school. There was a course in our last quarter called Expert Systems, and that had all the theoretical backing of AI, neural networks, and so on. Obviously, the compute at that time was so weak that, in fact, the first mainframe that we worked on, or like whatever the Unix computer that we worked on, that was powering Tata Motors' entire payroll, is probably less powerful than my iPhone today, right? But then fast forward, like when I was in transition between Adobe and Meta, one of the things that I wanted to do is actually get my hands dirty on some of the technologies that I always wanted to, as well as they were making a buzz. Now, LLMs were not a thing at that time, but I took a problem actually from my music world and simplified it enough to kind of it was basically a problem about tabla improvisation or percussion, Indian percussion improvisation. And my theory was like if I feed enough training data to recurrent neural network, can it generate like its own improvisation? And I actually have that on GitHub somewhere. If go to GitHub and search for my name, you'll actually
Oh, wow.
get that experiment. My point is, I mean, it was not like it was a model that was running on my Mac, so it was not like out of the world brilliant models like some of the models that are there today. But I learned a tremendous number of things out of that that experience. So yeah, I think what personally excites me is if I get time to fiddle with some of these technologies personally, which unfortunately happens less and less of late, but there's always the intent.
Yeah, but that's great. Like you're, especially like something to do with music, and you're being able to like pull it into and like apply AI to it, and play around with it. I think that's the thing, because we think about these things, right? Like there are all these technologies, and then there is everyday. How does our everyday life gets shaped by these technologies? And you mentioned some of these things around AI plus things with the self-driving cars and the robotics or the Roombas and things like that. And there is so much that now AI has, and now everything has. I mean, all the tools we use have AI in it,
Yep.
but there is, and even with like some of the AR VR things, I mean, it's been there, and slowly things will sort of, they will start becoming mainstream as you see the applications happen as well. And I know there's some of these, like the Ray-Ban stuff is also happening, like the glasses are coming out with more things, and which is exciting. I think there's so much potential, and at the same time, like building AI driven solutions, there's always that balance that one has to maintain between technical innovation and business pragmatism. And
Correct.
I'm sure you have faced that too. How do you look at it?
Actually, I look at it slightly differently. The way you described it, technical innovation and balance between that and business pragmatism. I don't think that as like either or a type of a problem. Like I can on some other occasion can tell you 10 different things that my team is working on that is actually using technical innovation to drive business impact. So I think the right way to think the most difficult part of that is coming up with ideas of marrying those innovation to create business impact. As a matter of fact, again, it should be there on my LinkedIn profile post. We recently posted a blog entry on Meta blog about an example of that technical innovation, like using AI and ML classification techniques to prioritize, what customer experience friction we should solve. So I think two are not orthogonal vectors, but then combining them is a difficult task. I can get it, but then that's when the art of our job happens, and everyone is not an artist, or everyone is not a gifted artist. Let's say.
This is where like the nuances of leadership slash understanding of the business and the technology and all of those factors come
But
into
then
play.
art is also about inspiration. So as a leader, you have to create an environment in your team where there is a cross pollination of those inspirations and like ideas, so that like people create their own ideas, and like that's how the impact out of these two vectors multiplies.
Yeah, that actually that's such a great point, because like so many things, a lot of the products we use today, a lot of them have come out of like some team has gone on and like innovated on some technology, and they just figured it out or did something, and it was because somebody inspired them to do it. I know like there are so many of these similar opportunities, right, with AI and all of these innovations, and we talk a lot about this within the Bay Area, within Silicon Valley. But when we sort of step outside of it, where do you see the most underserved opportunities for AI and machine learning today outside of Silicon Valley?
I think the AI and machine learning world is today is what internet was in the early 90s. Like it's the promising technology is there, but its full impact is yet to be realized. So, like even in Silicon Valley, I would argue the tiniest fraction of AI's impact has been realized, and like the it's going to transform the way we engage with technology, engage with our work, go about our day-to-day life in a way that we haven't even begun to imagine. I think I'll give you a parallel example. I talked about internet, but like think about where things were when first iPhone was launched. It did not have app store, so it has whatever limited things. That itself was powerful enough, like because you had like mobile browser and internet on that, which hadn't happened before. But as soon as like the third party apps started being created from the second generation of iPhone, like I don't think when Steve Jobs opened that up, as you know, famously he changed his opinion about having third-party SDKs on iPhones somewhere between the first year and second year, to his credit. But I don't think they would have imagined what App Store and the number of things that you could do with apps would have happened. It's the same story with AI. Like people haven't even begun to imagine what they can do with AI. You know, the potential is just amazing, and in all sorts of fields. So
Yeah.
it's hard to say that this particular area is underserved or that. It's pretty much the whole world is significantly underserved because we really at the cusp of that revolution.
There's so much more. I feel like, I mean, I know I ask you this, and yet at the same time, even here, that we are still trying to understand how this all works and what are its true capabilities and what are its true limitations, and how do we get past these things. And sometimes we know more and then we realize something else. And sometimes there are also places or people where they may not understand some things fully, and so then there can be either concerns where because when you don't understand something fully, there is more fear around it, and there is a growing concern. And there have been a lot of posts and memos that have come out recently from a few different CEOs, and so there's growing concern about AI displacing jobs. What's your take on it? And have people come up to you and ask this question? And what would you tell maybe those teams or peers if they're anxious about the impact of AI?
I'm one of those people who actually agrees that there's a big threat of replacing a lot of jobs. And I don't think we as a society, as economic management units in every country, we have figured out how we are going to change economic structure in this world. Let me give you a small example. Like in early 1990s, there was a big push for globalization, and obviously internet and eventually mobile computing accelerated some of that. Now that globalization, arguably purely based on macroeconomic parameters, made things better. It grew world's economy much faster. It probably made things much cheaper. But I mean, did it apply its benefits to everyone uniformly? Like certainly you and I probably benefited, but there's a large number of people who were left behind. And we see that backlash coming from that in through political systems all over the world, right? And so my point is, like, it's a legitimate concern, and I actually happen to believe that backlash is legitimate because people who were championing for that system, they should have thought through, like, what are they going to do with, like, the society as a whole. You cannot, especially in democratic setup, you cannot create winners and losers in such a stark way where a group of people are left behind and the rest of the society doesn't care and they just kind of keep preaching to them that you need to retrain themselves. It is not possible, especially like people who are in my stage of life, right? Now, with AI, my concern is that that is going to happen at a much bigger scale that we haven't even imagined. And there are lots of open questions, and I don't pretend that I have answers to that, but I just hope that we as a society don't make the same mistake that we made with the last wave of revolution, which is like, how do you that incremental productivity, it's not even incremental, exponential productivity that AI will bring in, how do use that to benefit of the entire society and not create these haves and have nots, and like then few people benefit based on the corporations that actually harness that productivity, and then a whole bunch of people lose their job and they don't know what to do next and so on. That's not healthy. It's a huge topic. I believe that it is not explored. I wish I had both. Like I certainly have intention to explore it myself, but I'm probably should partner with somebody who has much deeper expertise in microeconomics than me. And I think the related part of that is like, what is capitalism's way to respond to this challenge, as opposed to, hey, like we are going to create these government-based systems and so on, because there are appetite for various systems in various societies, and that change management to that new world is also going to be a big problem. This is a huge issue that people are not talking about. One of the people that I know, they were asking about whether AI should be regulated or not, and I'm sure there is a right answer to that. But I said, more than regulated or not, this is a bigger question that no one is thinking about. Because whether it's regulated or not, this it's only going to delay a little bit of this transformation mission. It's not going to. We can't just wish away that this is not going to happen.
You do bring up a very big point, because the more you think about it, it is a highly complex, highly convoluted problem. Like, to start off, you can think about just within the tech thing, right? We talk about, is it displacing engineers' jobs, or is it displacing sales or content creators and things like that? But beyond that, there is so much more that can happen. I mean, just last week I was having this conversation about, like, does AI widen the healthcare gap? Because if you put AI into healthcare devices, but like in places where rural places have less healthcare access, but if AI can do more healthcare related stuff, but then that still doesn't help those places, because AI technology will be more expensive and those places cannot afford it. So there is a lot of inequality that can come about as well. And so now it starts getting into, like, every vertical might need to look at it in a different way. And so now it almost feels like a Pandora's box.
Yes, but that box needs to be opened and dealt with. Otherwise, we cannot just pretend that it doesn't exist.
I know, I know. Well, I mean, again, we could keep talking about it, but I think we probably need more people in that conversation, and it definitely needs to happen at a broader scale. I did want to kind of talk to you about something very special to you, and this episode would not be complete without it, which is music. You are a musician. What role does music play in your life? You have been doing it since you were 8. And what, if any influence has it had on your professional life? I know you said you used it to tinker around with LLMs.
I know
But
that I
yeah,
don't think that's the right way to think about it, but I think music has been a big part of my life, and on one side it's hobby, it keeps your learning going at a very basic level. Like some of the things that I'm working on at this stage in my life, like after playing flute for, I don't know, 40 years or whatever years I've been playing that for. You often find like some teenager who barely has explored that, suddenly they get that naturally. And so like these small things, you kind of say, okay, I'm stalled here and I need to unblock myself. The beauty of music is it's very right brain learning. Like you learn, like engineering or MBA or most of the learnings that in STEM that happens is left brain learning. You like take a problem statement, you break it down to individual manageable pieces, and then assemble that together to come up with a solution. Here you can do that, but like most people who are really creative and like accomplished, I've seen them approach that problem as a whole, and it's a very different way of learning. And like I have tried my hand at teaching in Bay Area, and especially people who come from engineering background professionals here, and they're trying to learn flute from me, they always get trapped with that, left brain learning, and becomes too unwieldy. So, in some ways, to a small extent, and certainly I'm not any great musician here, but like it sort of frees up your right brain. There's enough research that I read about it where, like, if that happens, like your creativity overall in all domains of life increases. I don't know whether that's true or not. But the other thing about it is like both music and particularly flute, because it has so much to do with breathing. It's a natural way of meditation, right? If you have had a really bad day and like something did not go right at work, You can just sit in the corner and just play one note a long way, and if you just do that for 3 4 minutes, suddenly you find your breathing is aligned, goes deeper, and that's a huge de-stressor, right? I remember I have a friend of mine who plays tabla, which is an Indian drum, and this is from the times when both of us used to live in apartments. So getting up early in the morning and practicing, that was not a luxury that I thought I had. But he was so dedicated about it that he said that he actually used to put a thick piece of cloth on tabla and plays it so that it doesn't make loud noise, but whatever he's playing he can understand, and fingers actually develop more power when he's playing without that piece of cloth. So that was very inspiring, and his way of framing it is like, oh, if I play this from 5 to 7 and then go to work, nothing sticks. My whole work day is zen, and there's absolute truth to that, because I tried that for many years, and that there is absolute truth to that.
That's amazing. I think you talk about left brain, right brain, and one of the things I was going to ask you is like data and analytics is so much different than music and
Correct. Yeah. I
creativity.
mean, engineering in general, like actually, when I started learning from Padma Vibhushan Pandit Hari Prasad Chaurasia, I was studying my electrical engineering in Mumbai. And I never had this notion that I will do music full time, even though most of my fellow students are now accomplished musicians by themselves. One of them has multiple Grammy awards and so on. But I always thought that those two journeys in parallel sort of made me whole. Maybe that was my way of having that left brain right brain balance even before I realized there was such a thing. But has been a lot of fun.
Was it hard? Like, how did you sort of overcome that, what you see in your
No, I mean,
students now?
fortunately, I started learning this when, early enough in my career where my left brain was not necessarily set in stone or whatever. Bad metaphor, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
Does music influence your leadership style or approach to your work or anything like that?
I don't know. It's difficult for me to answer. Maybe, I mean, there is difficult to make an A/B test on this, right? The Prasad before music and Prasad after music, and are they different? But maybe there is another A/B test. Maybe some of my team members you can probably talk to if they compare maybe me to their other bosses and they perceive something different for hopefully better. There might be something there. I don't know.
Well, that's good. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing about your musical journey. I think it is so great. I feel like one of the things, and this is something we do with our son, is to help him like play some musical instrument, because I don't know how to play one, and neither does my spouse. And it's so important to be able to play something. I think there is, like you said, I think there is something meditational about it. You sit, there is like very much a focus required, and it's
But I'll
something
tell
you
you
do.
another thing though, sorry to interrupt, but it doesn't have to be music. It can be any hobby. So I'll give you my version of this as well. So other than music, I am a big fan of exotic cooking, right? Experimental exotic cooking, like Michelin starish. And whenever I do that, like my friends would vouch, they are sitting right around the kitchen and I get into zone, and that is extremely meditative as well. It is as meditative as playing flute. It's a completely different experience. So my take on this is it's not just music. Everyone needs to have some hobby, interest, whatever that might be. If you talk to my wife, she is into bird photography and that sort of thing. That won't resonate with me, but it does resonate with her. So this is very personal, and everyone can have their own version of it. I just don't know what.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, definitely. I think the music does like, it's so much like, we may be into music, but like playing something, I think it's a different thing. It's a skill, it's an art, it's so much. I think like cooking is for you. I think baking is for me. I think the measuring things puts me into focus.
Yeah, but by the way,
So
I'm exactly opposite of that. My mother is a PhD in organic chemistry, and she gets a heart attack when she sees me putting things without measuring, and turns out good.
yeah, there you go. But yeah, that's what we do with cooking. But yeah, this is so fun. Like we kind of like gone from like talk not having to think about like the complex things that can happen with AI to like ending on a high note, pun intended here. To last question here: what belief about leadership did you once hold that you have since changed your mind about?
I remember this as if it happened yesterday. We had a course at IIM Lucknow called, we used to call it SPIDER, Self Development and Interpersonal Relationships. And that professor was great. And one of the main project in that course is you write your autobiography. Till that point, I was what, 24, 25 years old, right? And then he would read that and he would give you feedback on your personality, right? A little bit of putting mirror in front of you. And I remember what he told me. I said, Prasad, you look at the world in black and white, and really the world is shades of gray. I didn't know what he meant at that point. And in fact, I would argue back like right is right, wrong is wrong, and there's nothing in the middle. And obviously, over the years, life has made me a little wiser. Maybe that thing is a left brain thing, and maybe the right brain kicked in enough over a period of time. I think I certainly don't see things in a black and white anymore. So that's the biggest change. I don't know whether as a leader, but as a person, certainly that has happened over the years.
That's a great story. Thank you so much. This has been amazing conversation. I really appreciate it. So much appreciated.
Well, I really enjoyed our conversation. I hope your viewers do too. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. If today's conversation sparked new ideas or challenged your perspective, I'd love to hear from you. I work with tech leaders and founders to tackle complex challenges, whether it's scaling teams, making high stakes decisions, or turning ambitious ideas into reality. If that sounds like something you are navigating, let's connect. Reach out via my website, thepriyankashinde.com, or find me on LinkedIn.